It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
You're listening to the Financial Survival Network. It's Kerry, Lutz, and economic ills. Well, you know all about them. Don't have to document them anymore. Really like to focus upon solutions. Is the solution to strip the wealth from the wealthy and redistribute it to the less wealthy, take it from the 10%, give it to the 90%? Is that really going to fix things? Well, Steven Rattner over on Wall Street seems to think so, but our good friend Don Watkins over at the Ayn Rand Institute seems to think otherwise. But Don, welcome, and hey, interesting article you wrote here. And this guy Rattner, he was behind the auto bailout, crony capitalism, socialism, collectivism, take your pick. So what do we do here?
Well, I mean, Rattner's views are not atypical. His basic argument is that we should be really afraid of rising inequality. And so he points to a claim that if we look at the earnings of the bottom 90% of Americans, they fell between 2010 and 2013. And those at the top rose just a little bit, about 2%. And so this is just proof that inequality is really alarming. And my perspective is, how in the world is that an inequality problem? It's definitely a problem that 90% of Americans are seeing their income fall, but not because some people are seeing it rise. I mean, the implication, of course, is that, well, it would be great if our incomes fell as long as the people at the top had theirs fall too. And my view is exactly the opposite. I'd like to see everybody prospering. And the reason everybody's not prospering is not because a few people are.
Yeah. So his thing is misery enjoys company. And if the bottom 90% are going back, then it's only fair that the misery should be spread evenly. So it's kind of like the reverse of Obama's statement to Joe the plumber. So when we spread the wealth, everybody benefits. So when we spread the pain, everybody suffers commensurately. And somehow that's a positive outcome, right?
Yeah, precisely. And then you have to see all of this in terms of what their policy prescriptions are. So their whole goal and their whole remedy for this is, as you suggested, it's loot the rich and increase government spending, particularly on welfare state measures. Now, if there's any reason to think that is the prescription for a booming economy, then we should look over to continental Europe and see all of these economies racing ahead of ours. Now, he gives a chart that shows some of these companies that are less unequal and that, of course, have higher tax rates and so-called more generous welfare states. And they include countries like not only France, but Spain and, of all places, Greece. Now, that should be at least a warning sign that we should be very dubious that the solution to our problems is to make ourselves more equal by bringing down the rich and giving handouts to everybody else.
Yeah, so if what he was saying was true, then the Cold War would have been won by the Soviet Union because everybody was equal there. And, to each according, right? All those bromides. And in fact, that's not what happened. The relatively free world, the less socialistic world, far outperformed the socialist world, and they collapsed, and they were forced to go towards capitalism, right?
I mean, the whole focus on inequality is wrong. The fact is that inequality is crucial to economic progress. All economic progress is driven by a handful of individuals being extraordinarily successful and by a bunch of other individuals striving to be enormously successful, trying to, in effect, increase inequality. And over time, the effect of some people being able to achieve enormous fortunes and then others earning, let's say close to the average or median wage, what happens is you get that rising tide that lifts most boats. And the real problem that we have today is that people are not free to pursue fortunes. They're not free to engage in productive activities without all sorts of restrictions, taxes, regulations, and so on. And I think what we're really seeing when we look at the kind of harm that's befallen most Americans, and it is something I'm very concerned about, there's no question that the major driver of that is precisely that we've moved so far away from people having the freedom to pursue prosperity, not the fact that we haven't taken enough from those who have succeeded and handed it out to people who haven't succeeded.
Yeah, and presumably the people who've succeeded following the rules, paying their taxes, and providing benefits to society in spite of themselves, people like Bill Gates, like Warren Buffett, and others. So let's get specific. Does he think Warren Buffett didn't pay enough taxes? Does he think Bill Gates should have given more? Tom Steyer, the stalwart of the Democratic Party, of which he's acting as a spokesman now, he should have given more billions then. I mean, let's bring it down to a personal level. Which of these billionaires are not paying enough of their fair share and should be paying more, right? Let's not use a broad brush.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a premise here that a person's fortune represents how much he's benefited from society, how much he's gained, and then the claim is that people like Bill Gates or Tom Steyer, whomever, they have to give back, and then we can debate, are they giving back their fair share or not? But that is completely false. That's totally the wrong way to look at it. The way that a person earns a fortune to the extent an economy is free, and we can talk about how some people get fortunes today, given that we're not a fully free economy. The way they do it is by how? Well, I mean, take somebody like J.K. Rowling. Now, she's created enormous inequality because she's a billionaire, and a bunch of other people got, quote, poorer by handing her $100, let's say, for all of her Harry Potter books. But her fortune is an insignia that people valued those books far in excess of the $100 they paid. Her fortune is representative of adding something to our lives. And the same goes doubly for people like Bill Gates, who not only give us the spiritual value of, a product, but the financial value. He's made people way more productive. I mean, I use not many Microsoft products, but Microsoft Word, and it makes it a lot easier to write, to create a book, to, edit and so on. The fact is that because every dollar that a person earns in a free society is the product of somebody else's free voluntary choice to give them that money in exchange for something they think is more valuable, a fortune is achieved through a win-win process. And so there's no question of, well, they've benefited the most. No, they've benefited us the most. That's why they're millionaires and billionaires. Now, you know as well as I do that today, a lot of people, there's a lot of potential to get special favors, protections, handouts, and so on from the government. And so you can't automatically conclude that a person has earned their fortune. You have to look at how they made it. But if they made it through voluntary trade, that's something that's great, regardless of how much inequality it leads to. And if they got it through some sort of government favor, then the problem is not that they've made things more unequal. It's that they've reached into other people's pockets.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the U.S., the way things stand now, it's become a lot of people using the political process to acquire wealth, something the founding fathers never in their wildest dreams ever intended, and in fact looked down upon, using the royal prerogative to acquire and accumulate wealth. That was anathema to everything that the United States was about. And yet today, look at the largest companies in the country, and they see that the return on investment for political dollars invested in the political process to either protect their markets or keep others out or whatever, far exceeds the return on investment of money spent developing products and other productive pursuits. So there's really something wrong with the system, and that's what we really should be focusing upon, not this inequality, which is normal in any productive normally functioning society, right?
Yeah, although there are definitely some companies that in effect are built around getting favors from government, but there's also the fact of when government has such absolute power over your future as a businessman, you're basically put in a position where you're being extorted to seek favors from Washington and to buy influence. And so I think it's important to realize that the fundamental cause here is not that businessmen are trying to pollute and control Washington. It's that Washington has basically declared that it has absolute power over businessmen. And so they're put in this impossible situation. Before the antitrust suit against Microsoft, they spent virtually nothing on lobbying. And indeed, they were often derided and blamed for not playing the Washington game. But when the fist of the Justice Department came down on them, now they spend, I don't know, I remember offhand what it is, but they spend millions on lobbying Washington. And so what is really outrageous is that the inequality alarmists, they point to this and say, well, what we have to do is stop the wealthy from being able to engage in political speech, which they call campaign finance reform. But no, that would only compound the injustice. What you do is stop the government's ability to have this massive power over our lives, and then there's no reason why business will go there. There'll be no special favors to get from Washington, and that, I think, is the only moral solution to that sort of problem.
Couldn't agree more. And when we return, what's the proper way to talk and publicly deal with the Rattners of the world to at least lessen their influence, perhaps make them reconsider their positions on the Financial Survival Network?
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Every week the show is growing. Would you like to be a part of it? Then go to clubfsn.com and help support us with $1, $2, $5, or $10 a month and get a host of premium content with newsletters dropped into your mailbox, free books, private audio clips, webinars, and much more. Then join clubfsn.com. If you want to get ahead of the trend and ensure your family's financial security before it's too late, go to clubfsn.com and sign up.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
In case you're just tuning in, just joined us, listening to the Financial Survival Network, I'm Kerry Lutz. We've got Don Watkins with us from the Ayn Rand Institute. We're talking about a recent article that Don wrote talking about Steven Rattner and his belief that the way to help the 90% of Americans whose incomes have fallen since 2010 is to basically tax the top 10% more. And, Don, like one of the problems of dealing with the Rattners and the collectivists is I think that many people who disagree with them really don't know how to couch their language in a way that doesn't make you seem inhuman or heartless or unsympathetic to that 90% who have suffered during this collapse, during the greater recession or depression, whatever you want to say that we're in. And what is the best way to address the argument in a way that it doesn't come down to, you're being heartless and you don't care about the 90%. All you care about is the 10%, because that's what they always throw in your face, right?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of things. So first of all, it's being able to separate out real problems from the so-called problem of inequality. As we said, it is a problem, and we should be incredibly concerned about the fact that a lot of people are not prospering. But the problem is not an inequality problem. It's not, as we said, the problem that some people are prospering. The second thing is to always hold them in the defensive. Always see everything in terms of their alleged solutions. So if they're going to claim that they care about the 90%, what are they actually advocating? Well, all they're advocating ultimately is take a bunch of money from people who earned it justly and fairly. That's their whole agenda. So we can debate all day what's happening to most Americans' incomes and how can we improve that. But it should never lose sight of their only remedy is to take from people what they earned. And the final thing is to keep in mind that what we should be concerned with is the well-being of the individual. And that part of what that means is each individual has a right to pursue his own happiness and to be as successful and prosperous as he can be on a free market. And so the real concern, if you're going to be concerned about equality, should be the kind of equality advocated by the founders, which is equality of rights. It's that each person has equal rights as an individual to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. And that doesn't come with a contingency clause, so long as you don't earn a lot of property. No, everybody has that. And so if you're enormously successful, that's something virtuous, and it doesn't then impose a debt on you that you should have to say, all right, well, yeah, go ahead and take way more of my money because I've committed some sin. So I think those are really the three keys, which is make it clear whatever the problems are, they're not problems of inequality. Number two, always stress that their remedy is just to loot, shackle, and silence the rich. And then number three is I lost my train of thought. Oh, the sovereignty of each individual, and the fact that we should be concerned with equality of rights, and that is completely incompatible with equality of economics, of outcome, of opportunity. It means equal freedom for everybody.
Right, and that really is the key to it. That everybody has the opportunity, that the government is not there standing in your way, really, with regulations, with taxes, with licenses. I mean, there are so many ways that the government obstructs your ability to thrive and prosper in modern America, and toll booths. There are toll booths on every stretch of American opportunity. The government's erected a toll booth there, right? Set up a new corporation.
Yeah. And it's somebody who's just trying to get started in life who's hit the worst. If you're ambitious and you want to make something yourself, like you said, there's people who, for instance, don't have a lot of skills. I was reading a book about some women who were trying to get off of welfare, and one of her major skills is she was really good at doing hair and braiding hair and so on. And yet, in her state at that time, I think it was Illinois, but I could be wrong, you had to have a high school degree in order to work in a salon. And of course, she didn't have one, and so her struggle was infinitely worse. Now, why can't she be free to find willing customers or a willing salon to hire her? I mean, those sorts of barriers are really outrageous, and that's the kind of thing we need to be getting rid of. Liberate everybody at the bottom, the top, and everywhere else to make the most of their lives. I mean, that really should be our focus, not on demonizing and smearing people who do achieve great things, because that's really what is behind this, is really an attack on success as such. It says you should feel guilty about your success. You have done something wrong, and in order to basically, and the solution, of course, is give a bunch of power to the inequality alarmists.
Mm-hmm. So level the playing field and strive for this mediocrity. And again, we see how this works over and over again, and it just makes everybody poorer in the long run. And, isn't raising the minimum wage just really the natural fruition of what Rattner is espousing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the minimum wage is clearly, when they talk about what to do for people at the bottom, it's inevitably give them more handouts or a higher minimum wage, which, that is the most revealing thing, because there's no question that not only does the minimum wage create unemployment by, raising the cost of hiring somebody, particularly somebody with low skills and low experience, one of the things it does, even when it doesn't create unemployment per se, is it makes jobs that harder for a person with lower skills to get, because that college kid from a middle class family who wouldn't work at McDonald's for $7.50, well, if it's $10, maybe he'll spend his summer break doing that and be able to outcompete the person who actually needs to put food on the table. You can't claim to care about poor people and then advocate things like the minimum wage that make it much, much harder for them to get a start. Because the major thing that people have to do to get themselves out of poverty is not get handouts, but get a job any job and work really, really hard to work their way up.
Yeah, it's so true. And, the negative effects of the minimum wage have been documented, proven beyond a shadow of a doubt in dozens of surveys since World War II. You just have to Google it. And before the country and the world became so politically polarized, these were really just regular economists, statisticians doing these surveys. And it's proven without a shadow of a doubt that raising the minimum wage costs jobs. There's not a question about it. And somehow politicians, in their quest for votes and quest for public approbation, just forget history. And it's all there to be seen. And yet the average American just doesn't want to know about it, Don.
Yeah, well, it sounds really nice. Let's give higher wages to people. But the fact is it has economic consequences. And so you have to think, what is the cause of prosperity? What is the cause of rising wages? And it's being more productive. And the number one thing, anybody who defends the successful Americans is accused of advocating trickle-down economics. But the way that the wealthy make us all wealthier is not by wealth trickling down. It's by making us incredibly more productive, by fueling the technology, the innovation, the capital that makes us able to, with a push of a button, create a car, whereas it used to take back-breaking labor to grow a few ears of corn. And so we really owe them thanks, and we owe them freedom. And that is really going to be the core of how we can see America move in a much more prosperous direction.
Yeah, only when society is more productive as a whole can that 90% be elevated. Otherwise, when society becomes less productive, which all of these redistributionist schemes accomplish in the final analysis, then society becomes poorer, and that 90% winds up effectively getting less. And the other thing is that when you tax that 10%, really, it's incredibly hard to get more money out of Warren Buffett, because he's got an army of lawyers available at his beck and call to minimize his tax burden, just like General Electric does. So how are you going to get more money out of them? Through the tax code. Can't be done. Proven. So
yeah, and we shouldn't. We don't need more taxes. We need less government spending, and that really, I think, is where the focus should rest.
Yeah, exactly. So on that note, Don, just tell us where we find your writing, how we connect with you over the internet.
Best place to look is AynRand.org, and you can just Google my name, Don Watkins, and my particular stuff will come right up.
Excellent. And we'll, of course, have the link to your blog in the show notes to this interview, as always, on the Financial Survival Network. Just go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com, sign up for our interview, and as always, Don, been a pleasure.
My pleasure.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.